anyone who is boycotting the products that come from or support Israel. Don't you feel healthier?
Okay, let's talk boycotts.
Boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
This is your reminder that the BDS movement is a Palestinian-led movement
that has been doing this work for years, and their entire focus is very targeted boycotts, sanctions, divestments that are designed to put pressure on the Israeli apartheid regime.
So B, boycott, means withdrawing from commercial or social relations within a country, organization, person as a punishment or protest.
Literally every product we are boycotting is so incredibly toxic. From fast food chains to high fructose snacks to sodas to processed foods, boycotting is hurting them in more ways than one.
Okay, D is for divestment, which is exactly what it sounds like, the opposite of investment, which means you're pulling out investments or subsidies that you would have been giving corporations. And S is for sanction.
And sanctioned companies supporting Israel.
And so a sanction is a measure imposed on a state, a group, or an individual as a punishment for certain actions.
These organized methods of boycotting and divesting have had historical precedent. It's a big part of what dismantled the South African apartheid regime. And the whole goal is to get people to focus in on specific targets to have the most impact.
So keep boycotting and keep getting healthier.
Ahlan, معكم Ryan, and this is episode 6 of the Vegans for Palestine podcast. Did you know that certain companies that market themselves as being, quote, vegan friendly are actually complicit in genocide? The BDS movement exposes how certain brands and corporations enable the Israeli genocidal war upon the people of Palestine. In this episode, Dalal and Waseem delve into the need for global vegan communities to know about the BDS movement and boycott certain vegan companies that fund the Israeli apartheid regime.
Welcome back, Waseem.
Thank you, Dalal. Thank you for having me.
So when we look at the BDS movement and how over the last few years it's been increasing the global attention for Palestine, and how more and more campaigns, demonstrations, and support are taking place across the world in different countries in the name of justice and solidarity and advocacy for Palestine. We have seen university campuses, encampments, corporate reactions with boycott, shops and companies shutting down their branches in different countries or cutting their ties with Israel. We have seen the cultural boycott also at the level of artists, academics, and cultural institutions. But the overall international solidarity for Palestine has been seeing a lot of success, more and more attention that's being brought to the world through the advocacy and the campaigns that are led and are done under the boycott, divestment, sanctions movements initiative. So as vegans and Palestinians, tell me a little bit about your perspective on this, and how as vegans we have been advocating for the boycott and for the justice in Palestine through the philosophy of veganism, through our understanding and values and principles that we do not exploit, we do not use, or through the principles and values that we stand in solidarity with humans, with all sentient beings.
Yeah, one thing important to keep in mind when it comes to how I view my values as a vegan is it's rooted in justice, in the sense that if I know that something I would be doing could contribute harm to others, and in this case the others is the sentient living being, the animals, I should refrain from doing so. So if I know purchasing a certain product or being in business with a certain company or advertising for a company, I am a food content creator by nature. So working with such things that I know is deeply, when it comes to companies that may have vegan products, but at the same time contribute great harm to the animals, I wouldn't want to be doing anything with them, right? The way that our corporate system works is all these large conglomerates have smaller and smaller businesses that they absolve, and those small businesses are the ones that are starting up as a vegan company, and then they get bought out by larger companies that are non-vegan in an effort to kind of vegan wash themselves. Not everybody, but when companies buy these products because they're actually competitors and they continue still exploiting the animals in other departments, that is what I'm talking about as vegan washing. And that concept it's related to anything that uses the animal rights movement as a tool for cleaning up their image. And again, not every company does that, but the larger ones that have not only direct contributions to harm of animals, but also multiple other areas, including harm to the environment, which part of the vegan movement strives for is that as well. And then, of course, oppression of other living beings, such as humans. So this is why, as vegans, it's not just put your money where your mouth is and like not put your money in a place that you wouldn't want to contribute, but it's also just a lifestyle that we live by, which is again rooted in justice in the sense that if I shouldn't be causing harm to others. So like unfortunately many of the ways that animals are exploited is for profit, like whether it's like shows that use animals, like for like dog fighting, for example. People pay for that. Horse riding, people pay for just like that, for races and stuff that is not just unnecessary, but it causes exploitation to the animals themselves and views them as a tool for profit. That is something that we stand by as vegans, that we shouldn't be contributing to. And we even call on organizations or on certain countries in some cases that are very known for certain things that exploit the animals. We call on them to not take part of that, to create policy that makes that illegal, for example. So part of being vegan and boycotting is a nature not just with money but also with their actions. So you boycott anything that is causing harm to animals. In that sense is how I would think about it. And then when it comes to our discussion with veganism, Palestine, and BDS, it's very much similar in the sense that a lot of the companies that we may be supporting as vegans because they have great vegan products sometimes are often bought out by larger corporations that contribute harm to many areas: the animals, the environment, the people. And with our discussion with Palestine, they have great ties to complicity in Palestinian oppression, whether it's through direct support of the so-called Israeli military or through operating on land or using resources that should not be for that internationally recognized territory. So there's a lot of complications with that. And the important part here is that focusing on, like I said early on, is our impact as vegans, understanding what our impact is with regards to boycotting Israel's contribution to veganism is crucial because, as we discussed in our previous talk, the idea of Israel presenting themselves as vegan and having the most technologically advanced industry in the food tech and creating vegan alternatives, protein alternatives, and all of that, that was all a strategic move by the government and it's backed by them. It's important for the listeners to actually grasp the full picture of how Israel uses and exploits the animal rights movement to divert criticism from the movement about what they do, and then also buy and get investments and interest in the economy of Israel, which has been growing. And I just want to pause here and just say that when it comes to how I think of being vegan and boycotting Israel, even though Israel is known in the world as like the world leader of veganism, and that was self-painted and like self-proclaimed anyway, but their contributions are now starting to grow globally. And that needs to, one, be prevented so that, we don't normalize that relations with viewing Israel as a need for the world to continue sustaining and for their environmental impact as they claim. Because many people may not know this, but like the leaders of Israel, like the Netanyahu and the President Herzog and previously Naftali Bennett and all of them have used that type of rhetoric about like alternative protein and Israel being a powerhouse for changing the environment and helping with the food insecurity issue and all of that. But we know how tied they are to causing oppression and starvation, for example, in Gaza for 17 years now, causing a siege on there and preventing all of that. Preventing a sustainable life there and causing and creating an unlivable, unbearable situation that even like in the early 2010s, it was announced that Gaza would become like an unlivable place by 2020. And people continue to struggle there, all because of the way that the occupation takes place. And on the other hand, their leaders go and tout themselves as environmentally friendly, trying to solve world problems in food and all of that. So it's much deeper than the fact that companies profit from operating in Israel, but it's also the the way that it prevents vegans to even criticize that.
Part of the things you were talking about, takes me a bit to an article that I read about it. It had this title, how heroes in the kitchen are cooking vegan meals
Helping
for
heroes in the
heroes
yeah,
at the
helping
front line.
war.
And
Yep.
I was, yeah, I think you read that as well. And it's very interesting how there is this chasm between just treating food as just some sort of a consumer product. I think, yeah, so with titles like that, it's quite interesting how there is this chasm between the food as merely the product, but also on the political activist level, there is a lot to look into when we think of who are these heroes, why they are portraying themselves as hero. Where is the heroism when you are enabling the genocide and the ethnically cleansing of Palestinians, and not just the people, but also the land and the animals and all the sentient beings. But let's go back to the point where you mentioned how Israel is being part of the vegan industry and contributing to veganism. So what is that all about? If you could maybe give us some examples of these corporates or some
Mhm.
of these products or services that they are veganizing.
Like I said, this is something that the government strive to do and have been promoting for over a decade now, but more specifically after 2017-ish. So in the mid of that period, Israel was becoming the vegan revolution and like getting very popular in that sense. And the Israeli government saw the opportunity in that because they wanted to capitalize on the fact that more people are going vegan. So they created this initiative where they joined forces, for example, with the Israeli company Strauss, which has been on the BDS list or has been a target of BDS in the past. They were co-founders of Sabra Hummus, which recently we know Pepsi bought them all out so that they can stop being boycotted, but that's probably not going to happen. But anyway, Strauss is a company that is very complicit in oppressing Palestinians. They directly contribute with financial contributions and food packages to the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Forces. And so in the 2017, around that time, I believe, is when a company called Aleph Farms was created through a government partnership with Strauss. And that partnership was to create something called a startup incubator, which basically is an investment arm of Strauss Company. So they look at startups, they invest in them and help them commercialize and like become more like in a manufacturing sense. Even though Strauss itself is not vegan, they have directly invested and helped with the growth of the alternative protein with that. So what I was getting back to is that the Israeli government, there's a body called Israel Innovation Authority, and they are the investment side, the investment department of that side where the government put technological investments in. So they co-founded this company called Aleph Farms, and they used patent technology from a university called Technion, and that Technion Institute of Technology is actually complicit with Elbit Systems, which is an arms manufacturing, deeply complicit, deeply on the BDS target. So you can see so many connections to that, but the point is that it's all to obscure the fact that there's complicity. So the government creates this protein alternative product called Aleph Farms to get vegans to to meet the demands of vegans. I should mention though that like Aleph Farms is just recently this year, I believe, got their or late last year got their approval for like FDA approval, or not similar to FDA, but like basically approves them to start selling directly to customers. So now they're gonna start expanding around the world, and there's partnerships coming up with different areas around the world, which will ultimately help the economy of Israel and will contribute to Strauss, which is, as we said, complicit. So you can see how they use veganism as a way to, as merely a product that is just for consumerism, that is just for your convenience to eat less meat, but really it's contributing so much harm to Palestinians, of course. And then additionally, the way that this whole thing is being framed is they're touting themselves as like going to solve like world food problems, as I said, and things like that, which has a cultural impact of that. And it's important to highlight that too, that like as boycotting gets, it's not just economics. It's not just like with affecting the economy, but it's also rejecting that normalization and that idea of, yes, Israel is green and friendly and, people should do business with them because they're going to help solve world problems. I keep saying that word a lot, but I read it a lot. We not only reject, like not just not buy into these products, but also we do active demanding of big corporations, governments even, that are partnering with these companies. Because one thing to keep in mind is that like how this works, and this is my understanding of like reading about it. There's a lot to read about how cultivated meat or lab grown meat, as it's actually labeled. This happens through basically science and medicine, like the study of that, to do biopsy of animals, to use their cells without killing them necessarily, but to use their cells to grow meat. And that usually happens through partnership of complicit universities. So like another example of that is the company called Believer Meats, and it was previously called Future Meat Technologies, but now it's called Believer Meats. That's important to note because many of those companies that I keep coming across have changed names, and I wonder why. But point
Well,
is,
something there.
yeah, just trying to hide some things. Back to this will tie into it, but back to what I was saying with Future Meat Technologies that now became Believer Meats. That's one of the companies that now, during the Gaza genocide, made a partnership with UAE to expand that cultured meat, lab-grown meat, whatever you want to call it, and make it more accessible there, basically, and start selling it. So that's something that is very important to note of, and I want to start off with, as a vegan Palestinian, as a vegan Arab, that we should absolutely, fundamentally reject such things, because not only is that like normalization on a commercial level, because we know that the UAE has, normalized with that, which, by the way, I came across an article saying that like this wouldn't have happened, and not just this specifically with Believer Meats, but also they did a partnership or invested in Aleph Farms a few years ago. So there's an article that I came across that was saying this wouldn't have happened without the Abraham Accords that Trump led and that normalized with the UAE. And it's very true, because before then you couldn't, do such things and make it normal to just do business with them, especially companies that are complicit. Because like I said, Believer Meats, I was getting to that point earlier, is that it was founded by a professor from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, which is recognized as partially located on occupied Palestinian territory. And in addition to that, they have previously, I believe in 2014 and then again in 2019, have made statements supporting the IOF, saying like, we support our warrior students, and they hosted some sort of army base or something like that on their campus later on. So the university is deeply complicit in the sense that they are very much with the occupation, with the oppression of Palestinians, and they're even located on, or partially located on, occupied Palestinian territory. So they have deep complicity there, and they created this Believer Meat company that is now in partnership with the UAE. And not just the UAE, they also have a partnership with Nestle. So it's not a partnership, not the deal is not like fully disclosed, but so I don't know the extent of how much economic wise that would contribute, but the fact that they have partnership with Nestle and they have partnership starting to grow globally is important for us to take note of and reject and boycott companies that are making business ties with them, so that they can cut those ties and stop being complicit. So that's with the case with Believer Meat. And of course, as we said, with Aleph Farms, the parent company, as I said, Strauss financially donates and gives food packages to the IOF. So there's complicity there. But when we were discussing, and as you mentioned, vegan friendly and the way that they vegan wash, this is important because it's tied into the idea of making it acceptable for vegans to view Israel as the world leader of veganism in order to have the economic ties and in order to grow their economy and all of that. So not just it's not just the organization Vegan Friendly itself, which I think people should be boycotting because many reasons, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But one of them is that they're expanding to UK, US right now, and I see their products in so-called Canada. So that company, Vegan Friendly, also donated to the IOF during the Gaza genocide. So there's also that where they're complicit in like oppressing Palestinians, causing and supporting war criminals while expanding and making their products that have this certificate as vegan friendly as more accessible to people so that vegans can just, contribute to that. But the point that I was going to mention and the economic impact comes from those so-called lab-grown meat and alternative protein startups that are coming from the settler colony. Because I mentioned the company LF Farms, I mentioned the company Believer Meats, but them too, and also Redefine Meat, which is a plant-based company that is now expanding in Europe. There's over 70 plus restaurants across Europe that sells it. That's as of like a few years ago. So now they're even more, expanding more and more. All three of them were funded or have been supported by the Israel Innovation Authority, which is a government body. And they have invested like that. The Israel Innovation Authority has invested one of I can't remember the numbers, but in I think 18 million or 28 million, something like that, over the years within that industry. And in addition to that, so it's not just to help those businesses grow and make veganism more accessible, but they also are used in government propaganda videos. So you have the foreign ministry working with Redefine Meat, with LF Farms, with Believer Meats to create videos to discuss the ethical and sustainable ways of growing food now and being more environmentally friendly and how this is necessary and how Israel is the perfect place for it. And that those videos were being shared across embassies worldwide and on social media, and it's all in English. So it's not it's all for propaganda to the outside world to be oh, there's so much development in this area, let me go see if I want to invest. And that helps the economy, that helps the oppression, and so on. So that's why, with these three companies, they have great impact on the economy. They're owned by larger organizations and companies, and then also they're expanding globally, as I said. So it's important that we reject that. If we know of a partnership coming up or a business tie coming up, call it off. If you see a restaurant offering Redefined Meat, try to, first of all, don't order it, but then try to work with educating or informing the owners of that restaurant of the complicity of such things so that they can cut ties. There's a lot of important stuff that we should be doing as vegans to reject that vegan washing and to not allow Israel to just continue growing its economy at the expense and the oppression of Palestinians, especially while using the alternative protein and the animal rights movement as an exploitation tool for that.
Since oppression is the root cause of violence, those of us who sincerely care about ending all violence must act to end Israel's 75-year-old regime of settler colonialism and apartheid. This begins with ending complicity. Launched in 2005 by the absolute majority in Palestinian society, the BDS movement is led by the largest coalition in Palestinian society. It is inspired by the South African anti-apartheid struggle, by the US civil rights struggle, and it's rooted in a century of Palestinian popular resistance. It aims at ending Israel's occupation and apartheid and the right of Palestinian refugees to return. BDS is consistently intersectional. It rejects all forms of discrimination and racism, including anti-Semitism. There is nothing Jewish about Israel's ethnic cleansing, land theft, apartheid, or genocide. Therefore, There's nothing anti-Jewish per se in supporting BDS to end these crimes and the structure of oppression that perpetrates them. BDS recommends the following peaceful forms of advocacy and mobilization to end complicity peacefully and strategically. 1, pressure policymakers to endorse a comprehensive arms embargo on Israel. Ban the import of products of companies operating illegally in the occupied Palestinian territory. And withdraw all UK investments from companies implicated in illegal settlements. 2, support peaceful disruptions, sit-ins, occupations targeting government buildings, as well as corporate enablers of genocide and apartheid, especially arms manufacturers, investment firms, and institutions, media, universities, and cultural spaces that may be complicit. 3, support declaring your community, union, cultural space an apartheid-free zone, refusing to accept funding, institutional relations, or sponsorship from Israel or its complicit institutions. 4, support trade unions blocking or disrupting arms shipments to Israel. 5, escalate strategic boycotts and divestment campaigns targeting companies that are complicit in Israeli crimes.
Knowing what we know now, what is the importance of the boycott and following the boycott targets and working towards achieving that goal?
So understanding our unity as like a community is very, and like its impact is very important. And I think that's another thing that's shared with the BDS movement is that, you know, to make change, you have to have a few factors, and one of them is being united against a specific target. That's why, you know, with the BDS, you don't see the hundreds and even thousands of companies that are complicit all listed there. They have specific ones that are causing more impact and also probably easier to make change for. So like more popular companies that would receive public image, you know, a negative public image that would hurt them more. Those are the companies that, if they're being targeted for having such a high impact on the Israeli economy that oppresses Palestinians, those are targets that should be addressed and, you know, chosen. When it comes to veganism, it's the same thing, is that like our unity against companies that are complicit, not just with the oppression of Palestinians, but understanding its impact overall, like its impact on the vegan movement, and then also its impact on actually harming the animals in the long run. Because like we said, many of these companies are like parent companies that are not necessarily vegan. So either way, you know, understanding their impact on the various oppression across the board causes us to make sure that we boycott them, to create that change, to create a change where we only have companies that are working and striving towards the values of veganism rather than abusing it. So yeah, we should stick to our values and understanding that if we stick to them, then there is that change to come, not necessarily by accepting anything that comes our way to make our life easier for our own convenience. That's the part that we need to understand as vegans, is to detach consumerism from our movement and think of our values first.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about finding these connections and the interconnectedness of our struggle as humans, and also the strive for justice and liberation. It's how both the veganism and the advocacy and the justice for Palestine work together. It's quite interesting when we see vegans who would fight for animal rights and are proactive and very vocal about that, but at the same time they fail to see that animals in different countries are having a lot of issues because of a certain entity that is exploiting even nature and the human life, and in our case it's occupation. So both movements are connected. They were in alignment with the fight and the advocacy for justice, and when we try to look at things from a different also perspective, the environmental and the social justice are also essential parts of what the BDS is calling for, and at the same time what veganism is fighting for, because they both eventually address environmental justice. And when you look at these examples that We have these corporates that are exploiting nature in certain ways to produce and provide to these consumers certain products with certain qualities and standards. They also, a lot of times, people fail to realize that this is all happening at the expense of the environment and the destruction, the deforestation, or the exploitation of the land, the water resources, you name it. Us as consumers, just generally as consumers, we really have a lot of privilege to access, to have, pretty much whatever we need, because now you have everything, available at the shelves in different supermarkets around you with different prices. Whether it's affordable to you or not, it can be affordable to someone else. But I think the question is about how us as consumers, we have privilege, and a lot of people who are already vegans, they have the privilege. When you talked earlier about the lab grown meat, not everyone can afford that or have access to that, or even like until now, the different vegan friendly labeled products, not every vegan still has access to them. I think this is something that is there within the capitalist, mindset
Absolutely.
of corporates, that they create this sort of gap between consumers, that we can both be vegans, but you're more of on that elite side of veganism.
Yes.
Someone is on that middle class kind of
Yeah.
veganism, that you want to treat yourself, you want to, just kind of enjoy certain things, but at the same time, the way the economy works, it really prohibits that. And that kind of gap creates this sort of blindness that I see it through the privilege, how some people are totally blind. They care about the product they want to get at the end of the day, they care about the service they want to get at the end of the day, and they're proud, they're vegan, they're maintaining that vegan lifestyle somehow. But there is a lot of just blindness here happening, and I want maybe to address this in a way, how the role of privilege plays a role in
Yeah.
enabling these corporates to exploit people
Yeah.
into being more consumers and subscribing to more and more products and services that are genocide friendly and vegan
Yeah.
friendly, and creating this sense that you're vegan, you want to get certain things, here, they're available for you, just take them, don't question, don't ask, don't research, don't do anything, and you're just a consumer at the end of the day, and this is the product for you.
Yeah.
So
So many thoughts came to mind when I'm hearing you, speak about this, because I want to highlight two of them. And one of them is recognizing that this idea of needing meat and needing egg alternatives and needing the best cheese alternative and all of that is a colonialist mindset. Like you said, you were saying about like kind of like classism and like being elite, that you're vegan on the side of like morality, but then you're also able to afford and access those great products so that your convenience is not affected at all, and you live your life exactly as it was before. You hear vegans say this all the time, that like, oh, go vegan, like, like your life won't change a thing, like you'll still do whatever you do before. And while that's true, it's understanding that it's not because of the consumerism part of it, it's because of the values of it, like we said. So recognizing that as Arabs, we have a lot of, not just from the food side, but when we talk about the food side, we have a lot of like vegan friendly already, like by nature, naturally vegan things that we eat on a regular basis that sustains our health. So to think that in order for me to go vegan, I need to find an alternative to the eggs that I used to eat is pointless. And that plays into the idea of me not giving up my convenience on that, knowing that that was contributing harm to animals. That's one thing I want to say. But then the other side is the way you phrased it. I can't remember exactly what you said, but I also came across, and maybe this will wrap up our conversation with regards to the vegan washing side, because I can talk about this forever. But Vegan Friendly, the founder, his name is Omri Paz, and he was recently, or a few years ago, really, in an interview just when they were starting to expand to the UK and the US. And in that interview, he was discussing how the journey of how Israel went vegan and the vegan revolution and all of that. And one thing that caught my attention was him saying before this revolution started, so before 2011,
I like
2010,
how you keep saying revolution, but
that's what he calls it.
that's like
That's what they try to
exactly,
like make it.
exactly.
And honestly, that's the thing, is that like they want to use that veganism as something that people are morally now fighting for, and it's a good cause, and now they contributed good, and they can just like chill out on the horrible stuff that they do and the occupation and everything else. And they use, and it works. It works so well with them. But what caught my attention in that interview was that he was saying, Omri Paz was saying, that before this revolution started, Israel was the least vegan country in the world. People barely knew anything about veganism, and people didn't eat like vegans and all that stuff. But then, when the production of lab grown meat and the alternative products and all of that, they became the greatest vegan country in the world, more vegans and all of that. And then the other part was him saying that because people, learned that there is exist like that that vegan products exist in a way that doesn't give up our convenience of eating what we used to eat before, those corporations, and he names them. He names Nestle, he names Strauss, he names Unilever, and a bunch of others, which are non-vegan. Those companies are non-vegan, but he names how all of a sudden those companies were so invested in creating more and more vegan options for Israel because more and more vegans, need them. And they saw that this would, and he even says that like it's a great way for them to make more profits. And they in fact make more profits on those products because of many reasons. One of them is apparently being cheaper to do so. But the other reason is that, and this is like something that he says, is the vegan population is financially stronger here. So that the corporations can charge higher and people will still buy it anyway. And that's the idea, is that like it's an elitist capitalist view of veganism, that I'm willing to pay extra to gain back my convenience and not harm the animals. Okay, great, but those products are complicit in genocide and complicit in apartheid, are complicit in occupation. And those products are being, again, going globally around the world, or starting to grow globally around the world, and they donate to the IOF. So it's, again, just a mix of using the products to cover up for Israel's crimes by showing that their soldiers are so vegan friendly and they eat vegan, and they're, even during times of war, they're still maintaining their ethics and all of that bullshit. Sorry about that. But they do all of that, and then they go and like advertise it as sustainable, environmentally friendly, solves a problem in the world for food insecurity and all of that. And then vegans outside on, in the West are like, oh, this is great, this is amazing, I can't wait to go on my vegan trip as a tourist in Israel, and I can't wait to get these products in my city, that can make me eat the exact same egg as I used to before, but without harming the animals, because it came from a cell from the animal, which is not vegan. Like, it's not vegan. Veganism says you do not use anything that comes from an animal. A biopsy from an animal to create lab grown meat comes from an animal, if you want to stick to the ethics side of it and the actual logistics side of it as well. So yeah, it's very complicated with that, because again, it goes to what your question was, and the idea of it being a privilege. And it's a privilege to be a consumer within the vegan space, because you get access to all of these things knowing full well that it contributes to the starvation of others. And again, this is not just a Palestine thing, it's a worldwide thing. But specifically with Palestine and how Israel uses veganism, it's a huge, huge reason for us to understand the impact that as vegan consumers we have to help with the BDS movement, and to reject Israel's contributions in any way, shape, or form, whether culturally, economically. That's what I would say about veganism and vegans, why vegans should be boycotting anything that contributes to the oppression of others, and in my case, Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of power there, and the BDS movement really articulates that power, the people that the people have, and it's this is not something that we should take lightly. It's basically, it should instill in us our purpose to keep fighting, to keep advocating, to keep educating people on what they are missing, what they're missing on. And as we said earlier, although there is a ceasefire now, but then again there is no truce, there is no ceasing from the boycott until all shapes and forms of atrocities, of exploitation, of destruction are seized. And
Yeah.
and realizing our role as vegans, and also vegans for Palestine, we should really take the steps forward to simply educate and
Yeah.
inform people, because oftentimes it's us lacking, not just, you know, not just the vegans, but also people generally. They lack the knowledge, and they lack the information. And even though people have access to social media, they have access to creators, they have access to different resources, they still fail to have access to the sources and the
Yeah.
information that really can educate them on the privileges that they have, and how they can use that forward to advocate and to fight for justice and equality, and from a vegan activist perspective, to fight for the right things.
As you said, with the ceasefire, the truce is not there, and the exploitation, the oppression did not stop, and that's part of the core reason why even in the beginning of this conversation, I said that, like, at its core, BDS is a justice-led movement, like justice-based movement, just like veganism is. So BDS movement didn't just like is like, okay, now we achieved the ceasefire, we're good now. No, they still have, great campaigns targeting those that are complicit in the oppression across the occupied West Bank, upholding the apartheid, any of the things that our work to achieve justice doesn't end with a ceasefire, and it really almost never ends, if you want to be honest about it, because justice is like a never end. Like, you have to just keep fighting for any time you see injustice. And with regards to Palestine, that would not happen until, first of all, Palestine is free and the Zionist occupation is dismantled, and we're able to have the Palestinians in the diaspora and in occupied Palestine to go back to their homes as it's given to them per international law, and also per ethics and justice that we all can agree on, is that, like, indigenous people should not be displaced, should not be genocided and taken away from their homes and denied their rights to exist there. So all of these things have not been met with a ceasefire. None of these things have been met with the ceasefire. In fact, more fire has been continuing. It hasn't ceased. So, yeah, our cause doesn't stop, and not as vegans and not as pro-Palestinians and as Palestinians, of course. We must keep on with our fight with regards to BDS until justice is served and Palestinians have their freedom.
Yeah, I mean, the first day after the ceasefire, it's a call for us to learn more about what is yet to be done, with 2.3 million Palestinians in occupied Palestine, still going through all the atrocities of Israeli occupation. And that should be our reminder and call to push for more action and advocacy and mobilization. We hope to see more mobilization and a push for an end of impunity for these corporates, and to hold these people accountable, not just for the sake of humanity, but also for the sake of all sentient beings, for nature, for the animals, because it's not just the human that is being here, and through the vegan washing that is being done, but also the environment and the
Yeah.
animals as well. I think what we can say is, I mean, veganism and the BDS movement are both rooted in principles of justice and liberation and opposing oppression. And we hope with today's episode, this is an invite and a call for you to read more about the BDS movement and the great initiatives that they're doing towards justice and liberation. And veganism, again, it seeks to end the exploitation of non-human animals, and also the BDS aims to challenge the systems of oppression against Palestinians. And when you think of it, it's when you're fighting for animals, you're also working towards and aligning with the same values and principles that the BDS movement is advocating for. And with that, I think, Waseem, it was great talking to you. I had
You too, Dalal.
I had a great time unpacking these different vegan and not so vegan friendly aspects of certain aspects again of the movement. So
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Dalal. Really enjoyed our chat.
صوت فيروز بكسر السكون، بتغني كان غير شكل الزيتون، وانا مخي صاحي بترجى بعيني، وعيني مغمضة مش نعسانة، بدهاش تفتح على يوم تاني، وانتي مش حدي انتي مش هون، لشو تفتح وتشوف الكون، لشو تفتح وتشوف الكون. تمنيت تروحي تاخد الملل، تاخد الحب، يتبخر أمل، يتكنى الزعل، توالي حنية بالشنطة انضب، وغني راحوا كلهم راحوا مثل الحلم، بطلتي هون اخضر البحر وازرق الكون، اخضر البحر وازرق الكون. قلتلك يا حب مع السلامة، شايف حرية ترقص قدامي، بس الحرية قلبك تعاسي، وفوق الكآبة محوط تياسي، فيروز بعد معبي الصالون، وانتي مش حدي انتي مش هون، اسود